Okay.
All right. There you go.
Oh, nice.
Just want to welcome everybody as you're coming in.
Sure. So yeah, welcome to all of those. Folks are trickling in here. We're going to wait a couple more minutes till we get a few more folks in, and then we will get started.
Yep.
So Eli, you said you're based out of LA?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles. So our company is kind of in the port of LA.
Sure.
So in a kind of municipality called Wilmington, but it's basically the Port of Los Angeles Incorporated.
Okay. Sure.
So we have that's where I was coming from today. So
Sure.
Down at our warehouse. But we do a lot of export of American craft beer to Japan as well.
Sure. Okay.
So we represent a lot of about America's top 50 craft breweries. So we do the Sierra Nevada and Lagunitas and a number
Sure.
of brands export.
Sure.
So it's kind of the other side of our business. And then we have Coedo and some New Zealand hops and other things coming in.
Well, before we get too far into our discussion.
Yeah, right.
Sneak preview for the
sneak preview.
Yeah, right.
Well, I do think we still are having a few people, but maybe we could just start. And we just wanted to start with a welcome from Japan America Society of Greater Philadelphia, as well as the Japan America Society of Pennsylvania, my colleague Amy Boots. We're really proud to be presenting this as a cooperative venture. And we really thank all our presenters for coming out to assist us tonight. And we're doing this program to build connections and relationships, and really to build community around people who are interested in the connections between Pennsylvania and Japan. So I want to thank everybody for coming out, and also let you know that towards the end of our session, we're going to have a breakout, and there'll be 2 different rooms, one on brewing and another on the business of beer. So if during the course of this presentation, you make a choice in the chat, you'll be assigned to that particular breakout room. So please do that during the course of the session. It's either, like I said, brewing or business. And with that, I want to just turn this over to my colleague, Amy Boots from Pittsburgh, and let her say hello.
Hi, everyone. I know some of you and some are new. My name is Amy Boots. I'm the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Pennsylvania, and we're based in Pittsburgh and are on the west side of the state. So we're very happy to be partnering with Philadelphia for this very first program that we've done together. I'm really looking forward to hearing what our panelists have to say, and also hearing from all of you in the breakout rooms. So I think we can probably turn things over to our moderator, Jason.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be participating in this event, and so grateful to Amy and Lois for bringing us all together here. I'd like to just give a quick introduction myself, and then ask our panelists to do the same. So to start off, I'm a manager in the consulting practice at KPMG and a member of the business committee at the Japan America Society for Greater Philadelphia, which is how I was able to participate in this event. I'm also a longtime beer enthusiast. For example, 10 years ago, as a home brewer, I was a member of the Ann Arbor Brewers Guild. 12 years ago, I cleaned floors, tanks, and kegs as an assistant at the Legacy Brewing in Reading, Pennsylvania. And when I studied in Japan almost 20 years ago, I really loved drinking at restaurants and bars with my friends. But at that time, I didn't notice a lot of regional or craft brews. Anchor was one of the few, let's say, Bud level offerings. And I am really looking forward very much to hearing from our panelists about all the things that have happened in beer in Japan since. So one of the things that I had asked ahead of time of the panelists is to pick a couple of beers to talk about, one in their own portfolio and maybe two outside of that. So I figured I'd lead us off with my selections here. And one, I'll start off, I picked these because of some trends in beer that I'm really interested in hearing from our panelists about. The first is Dock Street Brewery, which is one of 4 breweries that I can reasonably walk to from my house. And so I think the number of local breweries that we've seen here in Philadelphia and in cities around the States, it's been great to see more and more people pop up and do their thing. Also with this particular beer, it's a 16-ounce can, which I feel like has become something that we're accustomed to seeing with craft. My second pick is this Sophie from Goose Island. And I picked this because, one, it's in a bottle, like, remember bottles, guys? It just used to be everything, if it was a nice beer, it was in a bottle. And I also picked this because, with Goose Island being picked up by the Anheuser-Busch InBev, group almost 10 years ago now, we're seeing so much consolidation, including, big craft beer portfolios from, Anheuser-Busch, InBev, and the like. This used to be like a favorite, of Chicagoans and sort of like a regional to maybe national, distribution. And now they have brew pubs here in Philadelphia, as well as Monterrey, Mexico, Shanghai, Seoul, and Sao Paulo. So that's, another interesting trend. And then third, Eli, I heard you mention that you do export of U.S. beers to Japan. And my third pick is Sierra Nevada. And I picked this actually because not only is this, something that, you could see a while ago in Japan, but I picked this one because it's a hazy imperial IPA. And I think of Sierra Nevada as one of the West Coast IPAs, something that they've been doing their thing for a long time. So for them to be doing this hazy New England style, it's that style that's just been a huge, trend in the States. So I would love to hear from the brewers about what's happening in their areas. So with that summary, I wondered if I could turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves and their businesses, and maybe turn it over to Eli to start, since he's to my right on the Zoom call here.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. Also great selections. So my name's Eli Rafeld. I am the importer for Koedo Brewery out of Saitama, Japan. Koedo was founded in 1996, so the same year as Stone Brewing or Ballast Point, a lot of the great craft breweries that Americans know today. And Koedo literally means Little Tokyo. So Ko means little and Edo meaning Tokyo. And so the Koedo beers, which kind of one you'll see here. So this is one that I picked out, which is kind of our best-selling beer in the US, which is called Ruri. So Ruri means light blue, like a light blue sky. And all of the Koedo beers are named after colors. And so they're really supposed to emote the feeling of a color. And so this one is supposed to be like a crisp, clean spring day, just when you'd want to drink a Pilsner. So it's a Pilsner style beer, traditional Bavarian style Pilsner, Czech styles hops, very crisp, clean. We kind of call it our utility beer. It's great with sushi, but it's also great with pizza, or it's great just on its own. And so my background, we also export a lot of American craft beer to Japan. So our company in Japan is called Nagano Trading. And my uncle, myself, and my aunt began that business back in 2008. and now we import the majority of the American craft beer going into Japan. So we do have a pretty good operation in Japan now, and we have our own bars and restaurants actually selling plenty of American craft beer to Japanese customers all throughout Japan. So we represent breweries from big to small all throughout the country. And so I had mentally prepared some of those beers. I don't have them on me right now, but one of them would be Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So to kind of touch on what Jason had talked about with Sierra Nevada is sort of really for me, my beginning into craft beer and sort of how I, went from being just a lager drinker into sort of a pale ale lover and hop lover. And then after that, I would say a little something something from Lagunitas, which is sort of a hazy wheat hoppy beer, kind of before hazies were cool. It's unfiltered, it's fruity, and kind of really kind of expanded my palate horizons for craft beer. So I'm located in Los Angeles, and so lovely to meet all of you, and happy to answer any questions later in the presentation. But those are my 3 picks.
Great, thanks, Eli. Andrew, can you go ahead and go next?
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Wu. I am one of the kind of principals, managers of Green Formosa Trading, and we represent primarily Hokkaido beer. We are importers, but primarily brand managers for Hokkaido brewing. This is an example of one of our beers. It's a Niagara Ale. Our brewmaster, Takashi Toda, has produced a whole line of fruit beers, as well as a craft beer line called the Otaro beers. So Hokkaido brewing, based out of Hokkaido. Otaro is the area of Hokkaido that he's based out of. He's basically been running the whole operation out of his brewery in Otaru, Hokkaido. And yeah, we have been in the market for 3 years now, primarily on the East Coast where I'm located, with distributors from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, pretty much down to Virginia. And so we run a pretty tight operation with some young, energetic sales reps and brand reps promoting these 2 great lines of beer. Another one that so just to get another sense of the other flavors or styles, he produced a cherry and berry ale, which is cherry, blueberry, raspberry, strawberries, like basically a whole myriad of beers, of flavors. I think if you want something to just kind of remember it by, I think what he wanted to do is every year there would be a harvest of fruit, ripe fruit from Hokkaido and like the nearby regions, even as far as Hiroshima, where there'd be like tropical fruits, there'd be apples, there would be plums, and there would be if there was an excess harvest, he didn't want the fruit to go bad, and so he found a way to basically put the pulp into the fermentation, and really it's a very fruit forward, natural, not very heavy type of fruit beer. It's been very well received by our audience, our market here. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, when I was a brewery assistant, one of my favorite things that we did was a Pilsner dry hopped with raspberries, which was terrific. And another fruit combination is, I have a friend who's in Seattle, and they always have a bumper crop of plums from a tree in their yard, and they give them to a local brewery who is able to use the excess that they can't possibly consume on their own, which is cool.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if we can turn it over now to Adam to round out the panel.
Sure, Jason. Thanks. Appreciate everyone having me here. It was always great to talk beer with folks. So I am the head brewer, recently appointed head brewer at a brewery here in Pittsburgh called Mindful Brewing Company. So we are in the south of the city. The brewery itself has been open for a little over 3 years. I came on about a year into their operation, so a little over 2 years for me there. So to get a little, I guess, technical, so we brew 10 barrels at a time. So that's a little over 300 gallons. My conversion to metric isn't very good, so I'm not sure how many hectoliters that is. So Andrew, if you can do that conversion for me, that would be good. Yeah, so a 10-barrel brew house, 2-vessel brew house. We operate 6-9 20-barrel fermenters, and then we have 3 10-barrel what are called bright tanks, so conditioning tanks. So not the biggest brewery in the world, but we do a pretty good volume. I think last year we did a little over 1,000 barrels brewed across the year. It's interesting. One of the ways we kind of separate ourselves from one of the local breweries is we tend to focus on variety as much as possible. So, most places, even at this scale, have 6-8 beers on. We tend to run closer to 20 beers on draft at any one time. So that's a big thing for me, is to recognize variety and recognize that, whatever style it is, not everybody drinks that style. And I think most beer fans prefer variety. So we really kind of run the gamut in terms of beer styles. But one beer that I brought with me tonight to talk about is our Helles. If everybody can see that, the lion on there. And that's really, to Jason, to go back to when you were talking about trends in beer, that's one of the things I like to see is that I think things are going more towards, I don't want to say traditional styles, but, more towards drinkability. I think, 4 or 5 years ago, it was how much hops can we put in, really kind of whatever style it was. And I don't think that war is over, so to speak, but I think, I think there's more of a appetite now for, not even just traditional styles, but, drinkable styles, that you can have more than one at a time. And that's, to think about it, to talk about a second beer, Oscar Blues Dale's Pale Ale is one that I go back to all the time. A lot of character, but still drinkable. You can still, have a couple. And even, I think it's Founders All Day IPA is another one that, if you have to, not have to pick, but, just to grab something on just off the shelf, you can always count on those two. So yeah, that's where I come from as far as brewery perspective or brewer perspective is, I think, like I said, the simpler the better. I think sometimes is the way to go. So that's my elevator pitch there, I suppose.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I kind of get excited in multiple directions when I see what breweries have to offer. Sometimes, they're within a really narrow range. Like we have a small brewery in Philadelphia that specializes in sours. And it's cool to see somebody who just is like, this is my thing, this is what I'm doing. But I also get really excited to see when there's a range of styles represented. And seeing people who do traditional styles well is also, it's just great. I love seeing when people have more than just IPAs on their menu.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, at this point, with the introductions out of the way, I wanted to start getting into some discussion and some learning from all of you. We have several markets represented right now, and the perspectives of brewers, importers, and what I would like to start off with is talking about what's exciting in beer and brewing right now in the markets that you're most familiar with. And so I wondered if we could start off talking a little bit about the Japanese market. Like what's exciting in Japan now in terms of beer?
Sure. Do you want me to?
Eli, maybe you could lead us off
here? Yeah, sure. Happy to. I mean, Japan's very interesting as a beer country. So beer, of course, in Japan started from Germany. And so German style beers are still the predominant, most heavily consumed. So lager beer and Schwarz beer are the two that make up most of beer consumption in Japan. But since sort of the 1980s, Belgian beer really made a big foray into the market. And so Belgian beer, as it's called in Japan, really is very popular still. So Belgian styles still do very well. And they were the first sort of premium import and sort of the first craft sort of expressions. And then from there, the brewers really latched onto American craft beer and hoppier beers. And so what we're finding right now is that really it's a move towards experimental fruit beers, sour beers, as well as hoppier styles of beer. And some are even venturing into hazies. But the gap between the innovation sort of in Japan, Japanese brewing and American brewing has really started to sort of tighten up recently, where you have Japanese breweries making very similar styles of beer now to what's going on in the US. So we see a big uptick in hoppy beers. I would say we sell probably 70% IPAs or hoppy pale ales throughout Japan, but we do see now people wanting to get into sours and wanting to get into gose beers and wanting to, also drink more American style lagers to learn what that's about. So really, and you see a lot of the big breweries now too, experimenting with sort of more craft styles. So even Kirin, Suntory, Sapporo are putting out their, sort of more, large scale production, but craft style beers.
Yeah. Are you seeing that differ by venue? Like I remember it, in upscale supermarkets, for example, that was, you'd see, the occasional American import. Like, are you seeing things where your Pilsner leads in different different places versus where you're going to expect to sell a wide range of styles in a restaurant or beer focused bar? What does that look like?
So it's interesting. So there are many more independent bars now in Japan, and so craft beer has really created an opportunity for people who are excited about beer to get their own license and to start their own bar. That's really where most craft beer on draft is consumed in Japan, are independent bars, not traditional izakayas. Traditional izakayas are pretty much owned by the large breweries. So it's very difficult to get a craft beer, like a Nama beer on draft at a izakaya in Japan. It's starting. So brands like Yoho, who, Kirin made a significant investment in, or even Koedo now, you can find at some of these places. But really where you're going to find the largest offering for American craft beer is still in sort of your high-end grocery store or sort of independent bottle shops and independent craft beer retailers. What I will say that's very interesting during COVID is now 7-Elevens, Family Marts, convenience stores are really looking towards craft beer. So it's the first time that we've been able to range a lot of American craft beer in 7-Elevens nationwide, but it's also the first time that brands like Koedo have really kind of looked at the conveni business as, okay, we're not going to say no to this anymore. We're actually going to say yes. And what that's doing is exposing so many Japanese consumers now to great Japanese craft beer that they would have never found because where they normally drink would have never served them.
Wow, that's super interesting. I was wondering on the side of Andrew, what you mentioned in terms of being an importer of Japanese beer to the States. Have you seen that seen change? You know, I think of, let's say, the big breweries that Eli mentioned earlier in terms of, you know, Kirin and Sapporo, and then maybe Hitachino as a craft, but or smaller. But have you seen that scene changing as an importer?
Okay, that's a great question. So several things are going through my mind right now. America's so big, right? I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be able to check out different regions around the country. I would say that in our little pocket here in the Northeast, and pretty much, you know, on the East Coast, there has been more and more of an interest in Japanese craft beer. Like you said, it's by and large, of course, people are familiar with the macro beers, you know, Kirin, Sapporo, Asahi. And then when somebody wants to try something craft that's Japanese, it tends to get very expensive, you know, usually twice or three times the cost of those macro beers. But Hitachino, I think, has been doing a great job, you know, just, you know, getting into accounts. Usually, you know, you'll see them at the Whole Foods, you'll see them at the Japanese restaurants that are higher end, willing to take a chance on, you know, more craft specialty items. So yes, you'll see places in New York City that are just trying to get, you know, more of a variety of Japanese craft beer. And yeah, it's, you know, Hitachino, I think, is kind of like the top craft beer, you know, in terms of the market. But the challenge is for retailers to, you know, find the right distribution, making sure that there's always supply of like the less well-known beers.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely been
I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a sort of a question that something that Eli was saying in terms of, you know, Konbini being a place where people would pick up craft beer. Are you seeing that change in terms of the outlets that you're placing, you know, import beers into the American market?
Yes, absolutely. You know, COVID has been such I think, a game changer for the market, that, you know, some of our and a lot of this is based, I think, state by state, territory by territory. So, you know, our distributor in New York was very heavy on on-premise accounts, and they're really getting severely affected by that. But in, you know, another state like New Jersey, where our distributor has a lot of off-premise, you know, they've been able to actually increase sales. We used to sell them by the singles, and during COVID, we decided to invest in making 4-packs. And it's really been, I think, a boon for our business, because everybody wants to drink at home. Everybody's looking for a discount, and anything we can pass along to the customers is really, I think it's really favorable in this market.
Thank you. Yeah, and Adam, over to you. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what's exciting to you in brewing in the States and in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, you know, so it's, I mean, a couple of things, you know, to tie it obviously into COVID a little bit, since that's, you know, what's on everybody's mind. You know, it's been really encouraging to see folks still wanting to come out and still wanting to support these businesses. You know, Pittsburgh's a really great city in general, for people just, you know, wanting to support local businesses. But, you know, during normal times, you know, there was obviously plenty of support, but you never know, you know, with situations like this. So it's really encouraging to see, you know, that people are, you know, like Andrew said, and like Eli said, you know, are want to drink at home, but are still willing to make the effort, to come to the brewery. And especially for us at Mindful, our distribution isn't super significant. So, we really need people to come to the brewery and buy the beer from us there. So it's encouraging to see that. More from the brewing side, and this is partly because this is, one of the things that I'm involved in, is I think there's more of a desire now for people to improve the product and for brewers to improve their product. And what I mean by that is that the industry has developed enough now, I think, people have kind of, not gotten over the hump, but you have people that are, operating successful businesses and can now really kind of turn it on and get the product to the next level. And that's something that only benefits the industry as a whole, is, better beer from everybody. So positive things despite current conditions. So.
Yeah, you mentioned that you don't have wide distribution.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that I have a number. I'm lucky enough to have a number of local breweries.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself, picking up more and more beer direct from them. Is direct to consumer big for you, and has that increased in the past couple months?
Yeah, like I said, it's always been, a pretty significant percentage of our business. But particularly when, in I guess spring of this year, when the initial kind of shutdown, we were able to pretty much quickly turn to that. So we have a small amount of beer that we are able to put in the 12-ounce cans, but we rely mostly on I don't know if anybody's familiar with the term, what are called crowlers. So 32-ounce cans that we fill and seam at the tap, at the brewery. It's not the best packaging, in terms of shelf life, but it's, we're able to get the beer to people. It helps us move that product. So it's like I said, it's always been a significant portion, but it's the percentage has increased for sure.
It's funny that you mentioned the crowler, because I think when I think of oversized cans of beer, I think of the Japanese macro brewers, and the really large cans, that you see in vending machines.
Sure.
But
sure.
I guess more recently now, a lot of the American breweries, especially I don't know, maybe especially those that don't have as big canning operations,
Mm-hmm.
will use those for sure.
We hope that people split them and don't drink them straight from the can. That's a lot. That's a lot in one sitting. But to each his own.
It's a lot, but some days are pretty hard, So
they are.
No
I will admit, yeah, they are.
Well, Adam, you brought up this past year and pandemic. I wonder, if if Andrew and Eli, if there's been changes or challenges in terms of distribution or supplies from your businesses. And Eli, over, can
Sure.
you start off with
no
that?
problem. Absolutely. Significantly, right? It has, Coedo is a premium craft beer. We distribute in 14 states. Our primary markets are California, Nevada, and Florida. And so we are mostly bars and restaurants, mostly fine dining, across the board between Japanese, American, fusion, you name it. So we lost a significant amount of market share. And so we pretty much all but stopped importing beer come April for Coedo and just moved through existing inventory. So we went from importing about 20, 40-foot equivalent containers every year of Coedo to a full stop. And we did that for two reasons. One was that Yeah, so a little painful. Luckily, we have other business to fall back on, and you know, our positioning has always been that we want to express the brewer's intent and fresh beer. So we do everything cold. We do everything at 5 degrees Celsius, all the way from Japan. So that's about 38 degrees for Fahrenheit folks here.
Thank you.
All the way. You're welcome. Yeah. So you know, basically 38 degrees. We import cold. We warehouse cold. We deliver cold. All the rest. Our problem becomes that if we're not pulling through our inventory the way that we would like, and the beers aren't presenting as well, and then you have sort of a lower attendance in dining, right? And many of our restaurants, frankly, just closing, and we lost a lot of great accounts, unfortunately, almost permanently now, we believe, that the beer just wasn't going to move as fast. And so we always try to keep our beer as fresh as possible and really give a consumer, and I think Andrew was talking about this too, really just making sure they're having the best experience with the beer, and Adam as well, right? So brewing good beer, making sure that yes, Japanese craft beer can be expensive, but as long as that value proposition's there where you're really enjoying it, right, then you're okay. And so that's always been our motto, is making sure the brewer's intent is there. And I think with COVID and just looking at just the decimation of the restaurant and bar industry, at least over the last 9 months, it's significantly affected our business. So we have done, partnerships where some direct to consumer sales, sponsoring some different charity things with beer, those sort of things. But yeah, all in all, I mean, we had plenty of kegs that didn't have a home to go to. It's definitely hit our business pretty hard, but we are seeing an uptick a bit in some states, right? But I think over the winter, we're going to see a lot of closures again. And we're kind of planning for April, May to really kind of restart the business, and we're all praying for a vaccine. So I think it'll just be hand in hand. But with the winter coming, patios closing and outdoor dining not being a possibility, I think a lot of these smaller sales that we've had will pretty much dry up for the next few months.
Yeah. And then, so fingers crossed all around, of course, on that. But Andrew, on your side, I thought that was really interesting what you mentioned about, the innovation going from singles to 4-packs, which, that's the factor that, again, I'm accustomed to seeing with the 16-ounce, cans. Is it a similar story on your side? What have been some of the challenges?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on Eli's, what he's saying, because it's just so sad, what we're going through right now. And we've all just turned to being able to survive, and also be able to adapt to the changes that are going on every day. We also pretty much went to a full stop in March. We had a shipment actually ready to go around that time. And it actually was kind of just, he had to pull it back to his warehouse in Hokkaido until we could find the right time. And yes, we lost 3 months of code on that product. We were only able to start shipping it again in July, arriving here in August. But I think what we've been able to do is kind of motivate our team. We were really just we were really hunkered down for 3-4 months. They were just kind of hungry, I think, in August, and it was a container of 1,000 cases. So yes, we were saying, well, hey, now it's nice weather. Yes, we lost months on the code, but let's just try to do the best we can. The brewmaster decided, he cut his price, and we try to pass that down through the chain. And I think we've been able to kind of improve the morale of our whole team, which is not a huge team. We have about 3 reps and 2 people working on social media and branding and all the designing. And we found, of course, yes, the 4-packs have helped with selling the product in big beer stores and supermarkets. And we found that strategic partners that were, whether they be beer gardens or craft beer bars, who really value our product and really want it because it goes along with their business ideas. So one of our best accounts since COVID is the Chinatown Beer Garden, which is in Philadelphia, in Chinatown, and they just opened up in August, and they've been great partners. I mean, featuring our beer, wearing our T-shirts and our hats, and basically really promoting it for us. And yes, these outdoor environments have been great because, of course, a great fruit beer is going to go well outside. And you're just kind of, and people want to try something different in an environment like that, where you're just out there, and and so having strategic partners like that have been really great for us during what's pretty much a down market.
Yeah, I can't wait to be drinking outside again. I'm sad that in Philadelphia we're getting firmly into the drinking in the house time of year.
Used for yesterday or 2 days ago.
Right. The occasional reprieve has been really nice in November for sure.
Nice.
Well, I'd like to close out with one question, which is sort of a look ahead. And, with all of you having been in beer for several years now, I wondered, thinking about the Japanese and the American markets, with looking back at your experience in the past, let's say 5 years in beer, what do you see, for the next, let's say 5 years ahead in beer that you're looking forward to? So starting off, let's say with Eli.
Sure. Well, I think as we're already seeing sort of this hyper localization of American craft beer. So there's nothing better than getting fresh, great beer from, just a place down the block. And that's only going to continue. That's taken such a bite out of the regional brewer share. So like a company like New Belgium, for instance, right, that didn't really focus on their local market is now trying to retract into their local market, which for many years, after sort of neglecting it, they're having a very difficult time. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this hyper local. I think also premium import is going to continue to grow. Premium import as a category is actually still a very strong growth category over the last 10 years for the US. And we really like imports here. It's still cool. I think it is a little cachet. And then I think, as Adam was saying, some of these more sessionable style beers and more traditional style beers are really going to become more popular. And so I think, moving away from these bigger, higher ABV beers to, what's more normal in Japan are these sessionable, lighter style beers that you can have a number of them when you're sitting outside and kind of enjoying beer. So I think, those would probably be my predictions, but I think there's going to be a huge boom after sort of a vaccine and COVID is sort of, alleviated. And I think we'll all be very happy with how much beer is consumed then. And look forward to that day. But it looks positive for beer. It's tough for a lot of these breweries that struggle to get distribution during this time. But I really think we're going to have a lot of great things to look forward to.
Thanks. Andrew?
Yeah, trends in beer as it relates to, I think what we see out there in the field. I think all my reps always comment, White Claw is such a game changer. This hard seltzer, I guess it's advertised as a low calorie, easy drinking. It's not even beer, but it's, let's call it a malt beverage, right? I don't think that could be ignored. And it seems like, yes, they've managed to really, you know, a brewery like White Claw has been able to like just really capture such a big share of the market through, yeah, their marketing. And that's something I know, you know, our group is always talking about. Yeah, because our brewery also makes these happoshus, you know, like these lower alcohol percentage, you know, I wouldn't call them exactly beers, but they're malt beverages. And so we see that trending, I think, and it's going to continue to trend. And we're like, guys, he just sent a whole bunch of samples of happoshus. Let's just give them out to all these different accounts and see what they think. And they're usually in
That's
like,
super interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Eli, do you know if the hard seltzer has a hold in the Japanese market?
It does not. Chuhai is king and will remain king for a long time. We do import a lot of hard seltzers into Japan from a lot of breweries who make great ones, right? Like Fair State, or some of these guys are making awesome, you know, like Denver Brewing Company makes a great, they have a whole hard seltzer brand. It's just so funny. It gets compared to a Chuhai, and, you know, they'd rather drink a beer, basically. So I think they're a little bit behind on the trend as far as hard seltzer. It will happen, I'm sure. It just hasn't sort of, you know, I mean, I think Chuhai is ubiquitous, right, throughout Japan, and it's so cheap too, right? And so you're really competing on price, I think, in Japan more than anything. Whereas here, you know, your case of White Claw or Truly is relatively the same price as your case of beer, which is great for those producers because it costs them far less to make it. You know, and that's why they have so many marketing dollars to put towards all this, you know, efforts. But really not yet. We're hoping, particularly for some of these smaller craft guys, but it's still too high.
Interesting. And to close us out, Adam.
So I will say we are guilty. We do make a seltzer at Mindful Brewing Company, and that's we could spend a whole hour talking about the seltzer. You know, as far as beer trends, you know, I think people becoming more aware of what's out there and what is available to them. You know, I think, you know, one of the things that the downtime, so to speak, has had is as people are discovering places, you know, that they might not have discovered before. You know, it's easy to go to your local place, you know, and it's right down the road, you know, but some of those places, unfortunately, you know, are not able to operate, or, you know, or have limited capacity. You know, so it's been encouraging to see people, you know, branching out. And I really see that continuing. You know, obviously I hope it's a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy with our wide variety of, you know, of beers. But I really do think I see that in, you know, in continuing is, you know, a more educated, informed consumer, which, you know, just means more work for the rest of us to get them the best stuff, best beer. But, you know, people being more interested in what they're drinking and not just kind of grabbing the first thing off the shelf.
Cool. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much to Adam, Andrew, and Eli. It's been just great hearing about the business. And at this point, I think we're going to start with some Q&A and give the rest of the attendees a chance to start participating in the conversation.
Do we have some questions?
And everybody has the ability to unmute themselves and ask their questions. So you can either ask it in the chat and we can voice it for you, but feel free to just pop on and ask your own question.
Yeah, I'll ask a question.
Okay.
So you're just talking about hard seltzers, Truly and White Claw and all that kind of stuff. What about hard cider brands? Is there any popularity of that in Japan?
Sure. Yeah, cider is fairly popular. Just, you know, I think there are gluten intolerant people in Japan, so that's certainly one aspect. We import like JK Scrumpies out of Michigan, which is just a beautiful cider. Michigan apples, very flavor forward. I think sort of, as Andrew was mentioning, the fruit forwardness of ciders, right? I think is very appealing. So like Ace Cider does well, some of these American brands, and also English cider's been in Japan for a long time. So there were, English pubs really have been everywhere. And so serving a lot of, sort of the more classic styles of dry ciders. But it's definitely popular. I mean, it's still a small market share compared to beer. Beer is definitely king. But yeah, it's a good question. There is a good amount of cider consumption.
I have a question. It's a question for Eli. About a year ago, the Nikkei newspaper did like a week-long series on craft beer information in Japan. I don't know if you ever got to read that.
Yeah.
I remember they had a whole long article about Koedo, and it was super interesting.
Yeah.
And they talked a bit about jibiru, so I guess that's for like local beer for small, really small breweries. Do you know more about that, or could you talk a little bit about that? Because it seemed like a really important part of history.
Certainly, yeah. So jibiru, so like JI, is really the historical local craft beer of Japan. So really it was prefectural. So when you would travel, it was sort of a gift that you would bring home. So it was an omiyage, right? So you go to Hokkaido, you get a beer from Hokkaido Brewing and you bring it back down to Tokyo and you give it to your friend. It didn't really matter if it was good. It was just that it was made there. And so that was sort of the beginning. And a lot of craft brewers now, they've adopted the term craft brewing because they want to differentiate themselves from the history of jibiru, which was, when craft started in Japan, some brewers were saying that they're a jibiru producer, some were saying they're craft, but it started to get confusing. And so jibiru was really using local ingredients. A lot of it was made by sake brewers as well. So they'd actually brew some beer on site as well. And yeah, there's a long history of it. So it really dates back to really like the early 1900s, all throughout Japan. And really when the Dutch brought, frankly, beer halls to Japan and people started to try to experiment with how to make this stuff that they were drinking, right? And so it kind of also was free form in a way. So it wasn't necessarily brewers who were trained in brewing. They may have been a sake brewer or they experimented with fermenting some other alcohols. And so that's why the quality wasn't always there. But it was really more of a gift item. But there is a long history of breweries. And so there were thousands of these little breweries all around Japan for a long time. And it was really sort of just a local kind of, gift type thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Wow, Clark, that's super cool. I didn't know about that at all. There's a question on the chat, and I wondered if we could refer that to Andrew, which is about the advantages for a small brewery and working with smaller distributors. Do you have a perspective on that?
Sure. When you mean a smaller distributor, do you mean by state or by, I guess, are we talking about importers, distributors, or the retail distributors? I'm going to assume maybe it's the retail distributors, which are the state distributors who manage their territories. So we actually are not the only importers for Hokkaido beer. We actually have a co-importer out of Los Angeles who does all the customs clearings and basically holds the license. They put their name on the label. Our responsibility as the co-importer is basically being the brand manager. So we promote the beer. We also do our job of supporting the distributor sales reps on like ride-alongs, so that they can also introduce their accounts as well. Because it is oftentimes it's very difficult for a bar, restaurant, or store to create a new account with a distributor. So that would be the disadvantage if you're a small distributor trying to convince a lot of these restaurants and liquor stores that already have so many, to open up another account. But there are advantages. And I think, the main advantage, I think, is if you can find a small distributor that specializes in craft beer. And they're already known for, understanding the market of craft beer and of course, how to sell its unique advantages from, just mainstream macro beer. You could get a sales force that, that could actually speak from experience, from their passion, and so I think that's the main advantage is to find partners that can really push it with their passion and caring for the product.
Thank you. How did you meet with brewer from Hokkaido?
Oh, that's a great question. So I got into this because actually my heritage is my parents are from Taiwan. My grandparents, right around the war, before the war, World War II, they had all went to Japan to study, and they actually lived there many years. Grandparents on both sides of my family. So I had the opportunity. It was a blessing to be able to go visit Japan a number of times when I was in high school, college. It would be just a short flight from Taiwan as well. And in my later years, I had participated in a meetup group in between like Japanese and Americans. It's like a cultural and language exchange, and I met just a great group of Japanese people that would just be really into Philadelphia beer. Arts, Victory are a couple that stand out, and we had this just crazy, cockeyed just idea of like, hey, let's just go to Japan and find, let's try to sell Philadelphia beer, market Philadelphia beer to Japanese. That's really hard when you're not in Japan. And so when we were there, me and my partner who's been in the business a long time in retail side, he's just like, well, you need to actually learn how to import first before you can export. We ended up just barely knowing how to import. We never got to the export part, but we would travel around. I had friends in the Kansai region, so I would go to, our first beer that we found was in Osaka, and we would visit, just looking at, researching like very interesting breweries, craft beer breweries that we could introduce to Americans. From there, we took a trip up to Hokkaido, and the rest is history.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have one more question. You have mentioned about the price earlier, and actually I got your beer from earlier this week. Then it was like $8. Then I was kind of surprised by the price. Isn't it burden to your business, the price?
I could definitely speak to that. Well, did you buy it at a supermarket, off-premise or on-premise location?
I bought that from the craft beer shop.
And where located?
I don't know what is on premise, or I don't know what is on premise or off premise.
I can answer either way. Yes, that's been our biggest challenge, actually. I think not just for Hokkaido, but I don't know if Eli would say, but and I love Kodo beer, by the way. I was so excited when it was in Washington D.C.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can find Coedo. I wanted to try that. But...
We're not in Philly yet.
Oh.
Pennsylvania's a funny state, but
and I've tried your beer in Japan, actually.
Great.
That's one of my favorite beers, craft beers in Japan. So $8, we're usually not that expensive on off-premise locations. We're usually, $4 or $5. Restaurants have to mark it up. They usually mark up our products, 3 times from what they buy it. And I think they for all beers. I think Japanese craft beers are just generally, they're going, if you have to consider all the shipping costs, you have to understand that it's going through the Panama Canal.
Maybe I'm in New York. Yeah, I'm participating from New York.
New York,
cool.
Particularly a hard one because, as our distributor says, they pay $1 million in parking tickets. So they think that New Yorkers have, they'll spend the money. But yes, we are trying to actually standardize our price through all the states.
Okay.
Thank you.
Happy.
So there was a question that came up in the chat that I thought would be a pretty interesting contrast. Adam, do you have the formal brewing training or credential? There was a question about whether there was, similar credentials in the U.S. and Japan.
So personally, no, I do not. So I have an undergraduate degree from Penn State in biology. So that definitely has helped me a lot. Just being familiar with some of the basic chemistry. And to be honest, at least in this area, most folks do not have formal education programs. There are several programs that exist throughout the country, but not to call anybody out. What I've heard, they're not always the best, depending on which one you attend. So it tends to be kind of learn as you go, which is I started as a home brewer, so I knew some of the science to start with, but from that point on, it's kind of been learn as you go, which is sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not.
I was just reading this Pennsylvania Breweries book and came across the Victory entry, and that was one where they mentioned that the co-founders had been home brewers separately and friends for years before establishing Victory.
Yeah.
But Eli and Andrew, from your experience, is there a similar thing in Japan where it tends to be home brewers going into professionally, or is there a little bit more formal route?
So home brewing in Japan is still technically illegal. And so, the American craft beer boom that we saw, in multiple waves, but really came from home brewing. And in Japan, it's still technically illegal. There are homebrew groups, people import stuff, they brew it themselves, but you don't have this wide acceptance of home brewing. So in order to become a brewer in Japan, typically you are apprenticing at a brewery, or, as Adam was saying, you study biology, you study chemistry in college, and then you decide that you want to further your studies. And there are a lot of Japanese folks who come over to institutes like Siebel, which is one of the, the most well-respected brewing institutes here, University of San Diego. But, there's a huge debate, I think, in the brewing community, right? So, it's kind of through apprenticeship, you can learn a lot. There are also a lot of Japanese brewers that go to Germany and learn in Germany and then come back. And there's also apprenticeship programs throughout Japan. I am not familiar if there's actually a brewing accreditation program in Japan, separate from either working at one of the large breweries, which is where a lot of folks get their training. So they get a job at Kirin or Suntory or Asahi, and then go on to start a craft brewery. So I'm not sure about that, but I do know there are a good amount of Japanese brewers who do come and get their training here in the US. And we actually have a lot of smaller craft breweries in Japan who are now employing American craft brewers who want to live in Japan, which I don't blame them for.
Well, if I can jump in here, Jason, I think we want to go to our breakout sessions. So that people, if they have any specific questions on either the process of brewing or the business of brewing, do that.
Great. Can you talk us through how to enter our respective breakout rooms?
Yep. There will be a question that comes on your screen that will ask you to go into your session. Okay.
Great.
All right, let me just.
Yes, the rooms are open now, so everyone should be able to jump in.
So when you get that message, just join the room that you're going to join, and then we'll be taking questions there and coming back at the end.
I think maybe our whole breakout room is first back
I was just saying,
in the other breakout room.
Yeah, I
Right.
had
We
both going
figured
on
out you
two
don't have
computers.
to
but-
wait for it to count down. You're allowed to leave.
Yeah, yeah, but there were great discussions in both rooms. So
Good.
yeah, it's funny. The first time I went to Japan was January of 2018, and then I got hooked on it, and I went like 6 or 7 times since then, and started going on tour there and stuff. And the last time I went was this time last year, and it seemed like between just in like about that 2-year span, it's like it was night and day as far as craft beer. Like there wasn't a craft beer presence that I felt in January of 2018. But then November of 2019, especially like locally, like I went to Issei, and it seemed like there were 15 beers that were very proud to be brewed, you know, with Issei water, with, you know, pictures of landmarks from Issei, like Miyota Iwa on the beer labels. So I think that sort of regionality that is already sort of naturally a part of Japan just kind of plays perfectly into this sort of emergent craft brew scene there.
Okay, everybody, we are hitting our 8:30 time frame. We start on time, we end on time. Keep everybody in the loop. I just would like to thank everybody for joining us, and particularly our presenters who took time out of their busy schedules, Eli and Andrew and Adam, and our moderator, Jason. We really thank all of you for coming and joining us. Want to add anything, Amy?
Well, I tried to click unmute and then it almost turned off my computer. So that would have been exciting.
Definitive end to the meeting.
Yeah, and it's over. You're done. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you coming and spending your evening with us. And I hope you'll go online into your nearest Japan America Society, wherever you are, and see the upcoming programs. I know we all put on lots of different things, but we couldn't do it without your support. So thank you to all of you. And thanks again to your presenters and Lois and Jim and Greg.
Hey, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good
Yeah,
night.
same here. It's a great time. Take care.
Good night.
Kampai indeed.
Amy, do you want me to stick around at all, or?
I think Lois and Lists. I think
No,
we're
I
good.
think we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys
Thank
again.
you. Thanks,
Yeah,
Have a
Adam.
great night.
I
Thank
really
you
appreciate
so
the
much.
opportunity. So I learned a lot for sure. So
All right.
Great.
all right, thanks so much, ladies. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Amy. It was nice to meet you, though.
Nice to meet you.